ಕುಂಜ ಬಿಹಾರಿ ಜಯ ಗೋಪಿ ಜನ ವಲ್ಲಭ ಗಿರಿವರಧಾರಿ ಗೋಪಿ ಜನ ವಲ್ಲಭ ಗಿರಿವರಧಾರಿ ಯಶೋದಾನಂದನ ವ್ರಜ ಜನ ರಂಜನ ಯಶೋದಾನಂದನ ವ್ರಜ ಜನ ರಂಜನ ಯಮುನಾ ತೀರಾವನಚಾರಿ ಯಮುನಾ ಜಯ ರಾಧಾ ಮಾಧವ ಕುಂಜ ಬಿಹಾರಿ ಗೋಪಿ ಜನ ವಲ್ಲಭ ಗಿರಿವರಧಾರಿ ಯಶೋದಾನಂದನ ವ್ರಜ ಜನ ರಂಜನ ಯಮುನಾ ತೀರಾವನಚಾರಿ ಜಯ ರಾಧಾ ಮಾಧವ ಕುಂಜ ಬಿಹಾರಿ ಹರೆ ಕೃಷ್ಣ 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 ಹರೆ 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 ರಾಮ 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 ಹರೆ ಹರೆ Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद् अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्री दास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। ब्रजभूमि श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। मायापुर श्री नवद्वीप धाम की जय। मथुरा धाम की जय। द्वारका धाम की जय। जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। यमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी महारानी की जय। समवेत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। गौर भक्त प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna devotees, welcome for ISKCON Seshadripuram morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we will be discussing Srimad Bhagavatam 3rd canto, 12th chapter, 4th verse. I will chant the verse. Sanakam cha sanandam cha sanatanam atatma bhuhu sanat kumaram cha munim nishkriyan urdhva retasaha. Sanakam cha sanandam cha sanatanam atatma bhuhu sanat kumaram cha munim nishkriyan urdhva retasaha. Sanakam cha sanandam cha sanatanam atatma bhuhu sanat kumaram cha munim nishkriyan urdhva retasaha. Word by word meaning. Sanakam, Sanaka, cha also. Sanandam, Sananda, cha and. Sanatanam, Sanatana, ata thereafter. Atma bhuhu, Brahma who is self-born. Sanat Kumaram, Sanat Kumara, cha also. Munim, the great sages. Nishkriyan, free from all fruitive actions. Urdhva retashaha, those whose semen flows upwards. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. In the beginning, Brahma created 4 great sages named Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana and Sanat Kumara. All of them were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semens flowing upwards. Purport. Although Brahma created the principles of nascence as a matter of necessity for those living entities who are destined to ignorance by the will of the Lord, he was not satisfied in performing such a thankless task. He therefore created four principles of knowledge, Sankhya or empirical philosophy, for the analytical study of material conditions, Yoga or mysticism for liberation of the pure soul from material bondage, Vairagya, the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in life to elevate oneself to the highest spiritual understanding, and tapas, or the various kinds of voluntary austerities performed for spiritual perfection. Brahma created the four great sages Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat to entrust them with these four principles of spiritual advancement, and they inaugurated their own spiritual party or sampradaya known as the Kumara Sampradaya, or later on as the Nimbarka Sampradaya, for the advancement of bhakti. All of these great sages became great devotees, for without devotional service to the personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining for today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Wish you all a very happy Deepavali. I suppose today is Naraka Chaturdasi also. People, I don't know, maybe the dates may slightly vary, some today, some tomorrow. But anyway, it's around what do you call the festive season or Deepavali season. So wish you all season's greetings, Deepavali greetings, and Govardhana Puja greetings, Damodar greetings. So month is full of wonderful spiritual bliss. So we will continue with today's class. Today's verse is in the third canto. Chapter is called the 12th chapter, and the chapter is called Creation of the Kumaras and Others. And we are doing the fourth verse. Now if you see the flow in this third canto, we are basically into the 12th chapter, and the 11th was calculation of time. Before that was division of the creation, and before that was Brahma's prayers for creative energy. So now in this particular verse, Brahma's in this particular chapter, chapter 12, which is entitled Creation of the Kumaras and Others, we are into the fourth verse, and the initial verse was regarding how Brahma created nations. So this is the high level background. Now we will try to discuss today's verse. Before that, let me pay my obeisances to the Parampara. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Jai Pataka Swami Niti Namine Nama Acharya Padaya Nitai Kripa Pradayane Gaurakata Damadaya Nagarakram Patarane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvise Satsunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Om Jnanatimarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamakyam Dadanti Swapadantikam Vandegam Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarajatam Sahana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhayeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we'll read this verse once more, the translation. In the beginning, Brahma created four great sages named Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara. All of them were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semens flowing upwards. So today we will discuss this verse and maybe being Naraka Chaturdasi, maybe a little bit about this particular day also. Let's talk on this verse first. So here, if you see the first verse actually talks about Lord Brahma creating naisance. It says, Sri Maitreya said, O learned Vidura, so far I have explained to you the glories of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his feature of Kala. Now you can hear from me about the creation of Brahma, the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge. Then Brahma created the nascent engagement like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conceptions or forgetfulness of one's own identity. Following this creation of this nascence, like self-deception, sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's own real identity. Naturally, Brahma, being a great devotee, was very feeling very, very bad. The next verse talks about that. Seeing such a misleading creation as a sinful task, Brahma did not feel much pleasure in his activity, and therefore he purified himself by meditation on the personality of Godhead. Then he began another term of creation. So that was the third verse. Then we read the fourth verse, which we are going to discuss today. So in this particular verse, the discussion is about creation of the four Kumaras, who are namely Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara. So now it also gives a description that these four Kumaras who are created by Lord Brahma, again, what is the reason why that they were created? What is their purpose? As we discussed this, to understand that reason for that, we already discussed the first verse in terms of the translation. It talks about Brahma created nascence, forgetfulness, sense of ownership, bodily concept of life, and all that. So why is that to be done? Why should that be done in the first place? What is the need? Why to create problem, right? And so basically, Brahma's purpose is, we talked about the secondary creation, the original creator being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And why did the Lord actually want to create all these things? So that we have heard many classes, but that is still to be told, because that is the basic understanding we need to be deeply having in our head, post which all the other devotional activities will automatically have to come. So the idea is, many souls, many billions of souls wanted to be away from Krishna, enjoying by themselves, independent of Krishna. Like, the children sometimes want to be independent of their father. They say, we know what to do, why you are interfering. This kind of a mindset. So the souls also thought, why should we be so much dependent on Krishna? Let me be my own master. Let me do whatever I want to do. Why to always think, I should be dependent on Krishna? So Krishna said, okay, if that is what you want, while that is not practically possible, but if you think that is what you want to do, try it out. So, and he's been so merciful. It's not that, Krishna is actually putting us in trouble by creating all this material situation. Naturally, we know Ashashvatam Dukkalayam, this place is called. And therefore, we are supposed to be suffering here. So why would Krishna create something to suffer for his own children? Because we decide, and he does not want to interfere. Beyond a point, force does not do anything. It's only the transformation of the heart, transformation of the soul, which actually puts the soul in a very nice, blissful situation. Not that you, by force, make someone do something, it will not stick. Maybe you may do it and they may be frightened, or whatever reason they may do it out of obligation, but it is not coming from the heart. So Krishna does not want to do that. So he says, okay, if that is what it is, I need to create an environment for you so that you can think yourself to be the master. And therefore he starts this creation, and he always does it through his agents. He is too big a person that he does not have to do everything on his own self. So Brahma being one of the most confidential persons, so that he is giving them the responsibility to take up this creation. So therefore it becomes Brahma's duty to create forgetfulness of the own self. I mean, how can you enjoy when you are already under the clear impression that, I am only the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? You have to be made to forget that thought so that you can think, oh, now I am the boss, right? If you know the boss is right in front of you, you will not get that feeling that, no, I know it is only he who is facilitating. But you want to think, I am the one who is creating my own destiny. I am the one who is doing everything. I am the master of this and everything. If you want to think like that, then you should forget that there is anybody above you, that, you are the supreme. You should think like that. For that, you should forget your original constitutional position. Therefore, Brahma is forced to create a situation like that. Not that Krishna is forcing him. We are forcing Brahma to create like that. So therefore, okay, so Brahma is creating. Certain things have to be done. For example, when someone is in a very, very bad diseased condition, then the doctor may have to perform some operation. It's not a great job to cut already a nice skin, which is already nice there. But this operation is certainly necessary. It will lead to blood. It will lead to pain. But that is necessary so that the underlying disease can be cured. So in that sense, that operation becomes important, and the doctor, even though he is doing some violent act, is actually important. So we cannot consider that as a violent act, because it is for the higher cause, and therefore he needs to cut, he needs to see blood. Similarly, Brahma, to bring sense to these living beings, first has to put them in that condition. Only then they can start seeing the sense. So he has to create. Nonetheless, therefore he creates all this nuisance, which is basically troublesome. But he, being a pure devotee, feels very sad. What is this? Why am I doing all these things? These things are not required, but why am I doing? Therefore, after doing, he feels sad, he feels dejected, or whatever, Therefore, he performs nice devotional service. He considers that to be a sin, that, I have done something wrong. So, therefore, he takes the holy name, he does devotional service so that he can purify himself of the contamination. Then, the aspect of, okay, so this is a reformatory process that is being created, if you really start understanding. So a person is put in a prison, someone who does something very unlawful, or that is not accepted by the society. So he is put into the prison. it's not just about punishment, right? Someone goes into a prison not just to take punishment. Yes, punishment is part of the package, but beyond that punishment, there has to be reformation. So if you see in the prison house, there are many reformatory process, including yoga classes, some nice reading, good books which they can read, which they can spend some time to introspect what is happening in my life. Why did I do such things like that? There are many moral classes and all that is also given to these prisoners, and they are also put through some rigorous work, so that when you are you sort of, when you are put into a lot of trouble, you are also mellowed down, you actually come to your senses. So there is a nice system in how these things are done. The food is austere, those kinds of things are given, but there is a science behind all these things also. So like that, when we have come here with the intent to enjoy, but the underlying fact is it is not true that we are not the masters of our own self. There is something much beyond that. So we need to undergo this reformation so that we can once again situate ourselves in a very blissful Satchidananda state. So for that, having created all this nuisance, the forgetfulness, that thinking I am the body and the bodily conception of life, all that, he is also creating a counteracting aspect which actually creates knowledge. And these four personalities actually represents that aspect of knowledge which helps the soul to gradually transform himself like that. So these four personalities are, Prabhupada very beautifully explains what are their individual responsibilities. So this 4 is represented by, the first one is the Sankhya philosophy. That is basically the empirical knowledge. So this was the first aspect represented by these 4 Kumaras. The one person is an expert in that Sankhya philosophy. That means we will come to the details of that, the Sankhya philosophy. Then the second person is for yoga. Prabhupada explains yoga means mysticism for liberation of the pure soul from material bondage. Then third is Vairagya, the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in life to elevate oneself to the highest spiritual understanding. And the last one is Tapas, or the various kinds of voluntary austerities performed for spiritual perfection. So these 4 processes are there which will help the soul come to this perfection of perfect platform. These 4 personalities are experts like that. We will talk a little bit about each of these 4 aspects. But what is also mentioned is that these 4 personalities are also mentioned as liberated persons. Maybe not in this particular verse, but they were supposed to be liberated persons. But Prabhupada also writes towards the end, he says, all these great sages became great devotees. So they were great sages, but they became great devotees. So now it's a very minute aspect. Already great sages but then they say they became great devotees. So what do you call as a great sage? That means, is he not a devotee? All sages, are they not devotees? So we need to think a little deeper into these aspects. Then Prabhupada writes the most profound statement in this thing where he says, for without devotional service to the personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. So these personalities were expert in certain concepts of philosophy. Also, not that these are some material knowledge, they are actually knowledge which will help us become perfect in our spiritual life. They are maybe some steps which helps, but by themselves they are nothing great. So that's important. For example, Sankhya philosophy, analytical study of the material condition, Prabhupada writes here. That is not the end in itself. These things create some kind of an awareness. Oh, like this. So beyond this, what? We need to come to that platform. Otherwise, there is no use. So these personalities, 4 personalities, being expert in those specific fields, they were still not perfect. Then what happens? Somewhere later, we will study that these 4 personalities, even though liberated, even though great sages, very powerful personalities, we are also reading here what is their mindset, that we will come to, that also we will discuss. But these personalities, in spite of being in such a condition, they were not fully realized in that sense. So they were actually going to the, Vaikuntha, and where they meet the Jai Vijay, and then there's a lot of arguments happen. And Jai Vijay obviously did not think them to be pure devotees. They said, you are not supposed to be here, because Vaikuntha is for all these actually pure devotees of the Lord. But somehow, how come that, and so they considered these 2 as not being pure devotees, these 4 boys as not being pure devotees. So that discussion happened. When did they start? That transformation from great personalities, very liberated personalities, to a perfect personalities happened when this discussion was happening, when this commotion was happening. Lord Vishnu actually, what is this happening outside? He is never, in Vaikuntha there's no commotion. It is all completely free of anxiety. Vaikuntha means no anxiety. But why this commotion happening? So Lord Vishnu was little, inquisitive. What is this? So he personally comes out, and when these 4 Kumaras actually see Lord Vishnu coming out, and then from his lotus feet there is this tulasi leaf, and then the maybe the sandalwood pulp. When the tulsi smell comes and they inhale that, the suddenly transformation happens from this liberated stage to the perfectional stage of devotional understanding that I am actually a part and parcel of the supreme, subordinate to the supreme personality of Godhead, and Vishnu is the supreme personality of Godhead. Krishna is the supreme personality. That transformation happens to them. At that point in time, they become perfect. And in the process, having become perfect devotees, they are now eligible to propagate this message of Godhead, and therefore a sampradaya, or a line of preaching the message of Godhead, started. So these 4 Kumaras, the sampradaya of the Kumaras, Sanat Kumaras, the 4 Kumara sampradaya, also Prabhupada writes as later, also known as Nimbarka sampradaya. Means, for example, that we all know there are 4 sampradayas. There is Sri Sampradaya, there is which is basically started by Lakshmi Devi, but also known as Ramanuja Sampradaya. That means the Acharya, the prominent Acharya in that Sampradaya, also sometimes they call it like that. Like this one is started by the 4 Kumaras, but Nimbarka is one of the prominent Acharyas in that line. So it's also called as Nimbarka Sampradaya. The other 2 Sampradayas we know. Rudra Sampradaya, started by Lord Shiva, and one of the prominent Acharyas is Vishnu Swami in that parampara. And of course, our own parampara, Brahma Sampradaya. Basically, it's the started by Brahma, and then prominent Acharya is Madhva. And we are also part of that lineage, Madhva Gaudiya, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So these 4 Sampradayas and these 4 Kumaras initiated this particular parampara system of the 4 Kumara system. And if you all remember, Prithu Maharaj, actually an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he actually took initiation from the 4 Kumaras. This is also there. We have seen in other chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is there. Now, this is the process of getting pure devotees. But before that, when you talk about these persons being elevated personalities, there is a very important word that is being used. Urdhva retashaha, those whose semens flow upwards. So these personalities have become very elevated, had very great spiritual progress for that there is one contributing factor, which is this urdhva retasaha. That means those whose semen flow upwards. So for all these four boys, Brahma created with the purpose of propagating this message, not just by preaching, but by creating a progeny who will all take over those kind of activities. So they will, not simply by only preaching, but by also procreating living beings. Because Brahma wanted at that point in time many living entities to come, because they are all waiting inside Lord Vishnu in the queue, so that they can go out into this material world and start thinking I am the boss of everything I survey. So there are so many who have to come out, and there has to be a an entry point into this material world. That can happen only through this procreation. So its procreation is also important, because we are giving an opportunity for souls to come to this material world so that they can reform themselves and go back to Godhead. So Brahma's intention is create. In fact, you will going forward, you will say he will, Lord Rudra will come after this Brahma, because of this anger that Brahma has, because these four boys are refusing to follow what Brahma is giving instruction. Therefore, they get angry. So Brahma gets angry, and Lord Shiva comes. And Lord Shiva procreates so many jivas, many people come out of that, and that we will see in the later chapters. But the point of why Brahma is doing this is his expectation is he wants whoever is creating to actually procreate more and more. But these four boys, nothing doing. They actually disagree. For a higher purpose, sometimes you can disobey the authority, because it's not that Brahma is asking them to do something wrong, but the higher purpose here is self-realization. Therefore, in fact, Brahma gets angry, but he does not shout at them, because he knows these are very powerful personalities. I don't want to get into any tiff with them. This philosophical debate will keep on going. Let me not get into any of that. He just tries to control his anger, and that comes out in a different form later. That's a different thing. But right now, he does not say anything much, but he's very unhappy. But these Kumaras, why do they want to be like that? Is because they are basically liberated. It is mentioned, and that is the reason why it is given is because of the semen flowing upwards. So this is very important, particularly for men. If someone has to be a very spiritually inclined, then they should know how to control their semen. So if you see Brahmacharya, the first 25 years of our life, the Varnashrama system very clearly says. So in that period of 25 years, the boys are actually very well protected. They are not given any kind of environment where they are coming in contact with women, so that these thoughts actually starts coming. So they are very well protected, and they are actually whoever women, for example, the guru's wife will be certainly there. The boys will be growing there, and she will be there. So the idea is to make them look at women as only mother. So that's the concept. So the guru's wife naturally becomes the mother of the children. Right from 5-year-old, they are put into this Gurukula. So 25 years, Prabhupada says, if someone is able to be like that, hold their semen for 25 years, then their spiritual life will grow very nicely, like that he's saying. Very important. So here, what is it going up? Generally, going down is what is the thing, which also takes us to the more and more into this materialistic way of life, because we know the sex pleasure is the highest of pleasures there is. Therefore, this is used to flow down like that. But the idea is, can it go up? Urdhva. Urdhva means to go up, how to flow up. So it is mentioned, even if you see Bhakti Vikas Maharaj has written a nice book on Brahmacharya, where he says this semen, when it flows up, it is not wasted. It is actually going up, and when it goes to the brain, it actually nourishes it so nicely. It is, even in science terms, the semen is very, very potent. Like there are so many proteins, so many things which are very, very nourishing aspects are there. You just imagine that is actually able to create a life. That is such powerful it is. And that semen, when it flows, when it is not wasted, naturally it has to go up. It will go up. There is one type of thing which I am aware. I have read this book many years back. how to raise your kundalini. In that, the part of that process is that the semen will flow, and it will come and flow into the brain. And when it flows into the brain, we are actually able to experience different dimensions, which is not what we see in this like material world. Like, not it's not what we see in material world, but what we see is actually enhanced much more, and our vision becomes very, very, what do you call, very broad. Certain experiences in that book I have read, the experiences are amazing experiences. Some people who are practicing this have actually shared in that book a long time back. I don't remember the details, but at a high level it talks about the person completely changes his perception of things. When he looks at a flower or a leaf or something, what he sees is much more different than what we see, because that power of the semen going into the brain, and particularly in a spiritual context, this nourishes the brain in such a way that it becomes very easy to understand spiritual subject matter. And that's why the brahmacharya, if the boys are able to keep like that, then they can actually progress very easily in devotional life. But today there's a lot of challenges. So therefore, the more the brahmacharya is contaminated, the more difficult it becomes for taking up devotional service, which we are seeing. And this applies even to the grahasthas, it applies to the vanaprasthas, and naturally to the sannyasis also. The idea is to how to stop the check of flowing of the semen downwards, but the idea is to make it go upwards. But with that, what it leads to is it gives the various levels of knowledges are available like that. And the first one is this Sankhya philosophy. So that one, if you see in the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada also Krishna talks about it, and Prabhupada explains that there is one verse 2.39 which talks about, thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of work. So these are all steps to go get that higher knowledge. So one way of understanding is through this analytical study. We all know this analytical study is in relation to the study of matter, very in-depth study of matter. The 24 elements, we have seen that aspect of this 24 elements. Very in-depth understanding of the elements, which is basically made of, which makes this entire material creation. These 24 elements, a depth study of that is called the first one, the Sankhya philosophy. We know at a high level, Bhumi, Rapo, Nalo, Vayu. So this is all the five gross elements. Then the that is being followed by the various senses, like the what do you call, the taste, the eyes, what the senses with which you can actually acquire knowledge. Basically, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth. So these are all things which you can, the senses which are used for acquiring knowledge. So the first, the gross elements, then these elements, and then the subject of those senses. Like, eyes are there, means eyes means sight, ears means then sound, then nose means smell. So these are the other five things. So there are 15 like this. Then the working senses, which the hands, the legs, the anus, the mouth, like this. There are 5 aspects. That makes it 20. Then there is mind, intelligence, and false ego, which makes it 23. And finally the soul proper. So that's the 24 elements. So an understanding of all of these aspects, which includes the atom, right from the atom to the soul, there is everything in between, is all to be understood through the process of analytical study. That is one of the Kumara's knowledge area, specialization or expertise area. The other one is the yoga system. And again, the idea of yoga system is to, Prabhupada in a very one line writes very beautifully, the or mysticism for liberation of the pure soul from material bondage. Mysticism, yoga actually is a process by which one is able to control the senses. One is able to control the senses. For what purpose? The idea of that is basically to control the senses, to understand that I am not the body. The more and more you are in the sense engagement, then how will we understand I am not the body? Because we are fully into the body and body activities. Therefore, the idea is get out of this bodily conception. For that, you need to control your senses. That process is called yoga. That's the other process. Analytical study is understanding of all these things. This other one is controlling the senses through this process of meditation on that Supreme Personality of Godhead and controlling the senses simultaneously. So that is the second process. And the third is Vairagya, the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in life. Purpose being to elevate oneself to the highest spiritual understanding. If you see in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, there is one nice verse which actually talks, if you are completely engaged in the sense gratification, then there is no question of spiritual development. This verse is there. Bhogaishwarya prashakta nam taya paharta chetasam vyavasayatmika buddhi samadau na vidiyate. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. So, one who is too much attached to sense gratification, then he cannot take up devotional service. Therefore, this is required. What is that? Vairagya. That means acceptance of complete detachment from material sense enjoyment. That's important. So, to keep away from this gratificationary process, which takes you away from spiritual life, one needs to develop Vairagya. And this one of the four brothers are expert in this knowledge of Vairagya. How to be detaching oneself from material engagement, material perception, material consciousness. Many of the way you can put it. But that is Vairagya. And lastly, tapas. So detachment is one thing. The other one is way of doing it is by kind of austerities. So austerity is also another way of controlling senses. Like, controlling senses. Yes, controlling the senses for attaining a higher purpose. Tapasya. That means, for example, fasting. Right? You fast for controlling your senses, that they come under your control. If you control the tongue, if you control the stomach, you control the genitals, then everything is controlled. And this requires a lot of austerity. To do that, it's for a spiritual cause. Today, a lot of austerities are performed for material causes. Like, people go on a hunger strike, right? Hunger strike, politicians do hunger strike. Why? Because I want to achieve some material benefit. But it is never prescribed for material benefit. One should do austerities. Austerities are only for satisfying Vishnu. That is important. Why Ekadasi is so special? Fasting on the appearance days of the Lord or the Acharyas in the Sampradaya, very important. That austerity is accepted. Reading devotional books and not any materialistic novels and all that, that's an austerity. Chanting Hare Krishna is an austerity. Nice simple Vaishnava dress is an austerity. Against all the so-called different dresses, wearing Vaishnava dress is an austerity. Eating prasadam is an austerity. Right? There's so many things available elsewhere, but keeping oneself very clear that I will only take prasadam is a big austerity, tapasya. So, like that, there are many austerities. Prabhupada has given everything so nicely that, we are able to get all these things as actually a part of the devotional life itself, not that you have to do them separately. I need to sit in yoga for 2 hours and then I need to follow this austerity separately, independently of what is the devotion, independently of the spiritual progress. All of this is combined together in one thing when you do bhakti yoga. That's the most important thing. We'll come to that again. I mean, these four Kumaras are still becoming perfect only when they actually add bhakti to the whole thing. Otherwise, it is all by itself. They are nice, wonderful, great, amazing, everything you can say, but they are still not complete. That's the point that we need to understand. So, this austerity. So, all of this is done, but when they combine with, like they said, the Kumaras, they were great sages, but they became great devotees when they actually understood their position in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then all of this, that means it's like we always say, right? When you put a 1, when you have so many zeros, but if you put 1 in front of that 0, then it makes sense. It becomes 10, 100,000, whatever, 10,000, then 1 lakh, 1 crore, whatever. It keeps on going. But without that 1, all these zeros are different. Like this, I can have a great in Sankhya, 1 0. I have another great in Yoga, another 0. You can add all of that. But the minute you put Bhakti in front of it, that 1, then all of this gets multiplied values. All of them have value. But in relation to Krishna, they have value. And they have huge value. But without that, it is okay, fine, great, nice, very good, that's it. It will still lead to Punarapi Manaram Puranapi Jannam. So what is time? Okay, 8:54. So we will stop here on this, in this context. So 3 important things, that these 4 Kumaras represent 4 different specialized knowledge, and they got to this position because their semen was flowing upwards, but by themselves there is nothing great about it. We have to, they actually became pure devotees when they took darshan of Lord Vishnu in association of the devotees Jai Vijay. So that is something which is a take home for us. And what else? Yeah, so that is the from this particular verse, and another 5-6 months are there, so we can also discuss at a high level about this Deepavali. We all know Deepavali day is more important in different ways. From being Damodar month, we know actually Damodar Lila happened on the day of Deepavali. So that's the day of Deepavali. That is, it's mentioned that the day prior to the day of Indra Puja. So those days Indra Puja was performed, not Govardhan Puja. Indra Puja was performed, but Krishna came and stopped it later. But this, before Krishna stopped it, this particular instance happened of Damodar Lila. So at that time, this is more to do with Indra Puja. So Yashoda Maya was actually getting ready to prepare for everything for Indra Puja. That's the Diwali day. She gets up early in the morning and prepares the milk churning happens. And that's when this Damodar Lila happened. So it's very significant for us. Diwali from that point of Damodar Lila. Of course, Lord Rama himself, the victory of truthfulness, the victory of devotion, the victory of everything over the evil. Like Rama defeating Ravana and taking back Sita, that is, very symbolic. In the sense, it's very, and that day is when he actually went back to the Ayodhya, and it was the entire city was lit so beautifully with so many lights to welcome Lord Rama. So for us, it's not about simply celebrating, putting lamps, wearing dress, meeting friends, exchanging gifts. All that is nice, wonderful, very nice, important. But at the same time, the tatparya, the message behind it is, we actually throw away the darkness from our heart and bring in the light of understanding the purpose of life. So that is important, the understanding of our position in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, understanding that, our getting ourselves to that constitutional position of our existence, that's very important. So this Rama being welcomed there with the lights actually signifies that. So if we are able to celebrate in that mode, it is very nice. And of course, the Naraka Chaturdasi specific day today being the killing of demon Narakasura, or he is also called Bhaumasura. He was called Bhaumasura. Bhaumasura was a very powerful demon, and he had actually terrorized Indra and all the demigods, and he had actually taken away Indra's mother's earrings, and also the umbrella of Varuna. So they pray, oh my Lord, please, this is all gone. It's actually for Indra, it's an insult. His mother's own thing he cannot protect. What is the point of being such a great, king of the demigods? It's a shame. It's a black mark in his whole career, if you want to say that, right? So he was praying to the Lord Krishna to save him, and then therefore Lord Krishna went there with Satyabhama. And then he goes there, and this man, this demon, he's got so many protection around him. I think there is some electrical barb, kind of. We all have know how to protect these things. Will anybody trying to enter through any of the, any point of that kingdom, they will have to face this electric thing. Like that, there are some heavy water bodies which will stop you from growing there and all that. But Krishna, nothing matters for him. He just breaks through all of these things, and he enters there, and then he goes and has a big fight with this Bhaumasura or Narakasura, and Krishna kills him, and he is basically the son of Mother Earth. And Mother Earth, after he is killed, Mother Earth makes some wonderful prayers to Lord Krishna, that is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Krishna sees this, when then he goes inside his city, and he also kills his son, Mura, demon Mura. And that's the reason why Krishna is also called Murari. So he kills this Mura and then Narakasura. And then he sees that, he has a major prison house in which he has got some 16,108 girls, very young damsels, very beautiful girls are there imprisoned. And then Krishna, they all, as soon as they see Krishna, they immediately in their mind only pray, oh, such a beautiful personality, we want to marry him, like that. Krishna being in their heart, knows their heart, and then he immediately arranges for marrying each one of them, and he builds wonderful palaces for each of them, and then he lives by expanding himself into 16,108 personalities, and lives with all these queens very nicely. So this is also one of the day which signifies this Naraka's annihilation. So we will stop here. So let's all pray for welcoming the light of knowledge into our heart, and the destruction of evil, the destruction of ignorance, and what all goes with it, so that we can purify our hearts. And let's pray for that to Lord Jagannath, Baladev, Devi, Subhadra, our Bengaluru Ishvara, Gauranitai, Srila Prabhupada, Gurudev, for their blessings on us, so that we can reinforce our devotion to Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna. I stop here. If there are any comments, questions, most welcome. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu.
Thanks for all your Diwali wishes and details about Diwali.
Hare Krishna.
And my question is, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Here in the last 4 lines of the purport, it is mentioned that and they inaugurated their own spiritual party or sampradaya, known as the Kumara Sampradaya, or later on as the Nimbarka Sampradaya. So how to understand, later on as the Nimbarka Sampradaya for the advancement of Bhakti. So the connectivity between these two.
Yeah. So as I was saying, this was a Sampradaya which is basically started by the 4 Kumaras. But so there's no dispute about who is the founder Acharya for this, very clearly. Okay. Founder Acharya is the 4 Kumaras. But in the process, there will be always powerful personalities who make a huge contribution to that movement. Now, in the process, there is this Nimbarka. He is the great Acharya in that line. So people relate to Nimbarka. That means he propagated that very nicely. So the same thing example you can take in Sri Sampradaya, originated by Lakshmi Devi, founder Acharya, Lakshmi Devi. But in the course, in the process of the disciplic succession, you have one Ramanujacharya coming. And we also talk about, refer Sri Sampradaya as Ramanuja Sampradaya, right? No, devotees mention as Ramanuja Sampradaya, but the source is Lakshmi Devi. Like we also, Brahma is the source.
Okay.
We come down further in that order, but Madhvacharya is the very prominent Acharya in the line. So it's also now called as Madhva Sampradaya, right? We call it as Madhva Sampradaya. But Brahma is the founder, original founder Acharya. Now, like that, when we come further down, ISKCON is also part of the same parampara. And we all call ourselves Prabhupada Anukas. Right? The prominent Acharyas are also given that's Lord's greatness, right? He is very happy that his devotees are glorified. And the Acharyas are glorified. And their name is also attached to that Sampradaya. That way we have to understand this.
So this is the same, lineage.
Yes.
From this four Sampradaya, and then Nimbarka took this same four principles, Prabhu? Yeah. Or anything advanced?
No. Actually, these four principles were basically their expertise before they became pure devotees.
For Kumaras.
Then they actually went to Vaikuntha and they had darshan. Before that, they were Mayavadis. In their mindset was Mayavada, not personalism. They were liberated souls, but they were Mayavadis. But when they saw darshan of Vishnu and that smell of Tulasi, they inhaled, they actually realized devotional concept and they become personals. And the proof of that is Prithu Maharaj himself took initiation from them. Prithu Maharaj, we know, is actually an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he actually gives authenticity to the four Sampradayas by taking what you call initiation in that line. So later they only propagated devotional life. But these things are all, some tools. Tapasya, because as I mentioned, right, we are also doing tapasya. We are also doing yoga. But all of that in relation only to devotional aspect, not independent of that. Mayavadis do them independent of Krishna. All these four principles. But for us, it is already inbuilt. They are side effects of your devotion. They automatically come.
Okay.
Hare
Fine, bro. Thanks for the details. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु जी, हम सबके तरफ से हैप्पी दीपावली। हरे कृष्णा, दंडवत प्रणाम।
हरे कृष्णा।
सभी को दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्णा।
हरे कृष्णा। Okay, so if there are no other questions, thank you all very much for patiently listening. We will end here. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gurudev ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gaura Bhakta Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna. Nagesh Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
I think you just joined, or I don't know whether you disconnected and joined. We just now finished the class, so maybe you can.
Yeah, I know, Prabhuji. Yeah, just joined.
You can see that in the YouTube. I think it is there on YouTube.
Sure, Prabhuji.
Wish you a happy Deepavali.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Wish you the same, Prabhuji.
आवाज बहुत अच्छी आई प्रभु जी, आपकी आवाज, सॉन्ग सभी अच्छे से आई। आवाज बहुत अच्छे से आई, क्लियर, बहुत क्लियर आज था बाबू। हरि
All
बोल।
glories to the internet provider. Hare Krishna.
हरि बोल। हरे कृष्णा।
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna. We'll end here. Shanta Govinda Prabhu, with your permission, I will exit. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu.